Alright, today I'm going to be talking about why Matthew Stafford is a Hall of Famer. Only 6.5% of high school football players are skilled enough to go play college after. Just 1.6% of those players are good enough to go to the NFL. And only 2% of NFL players are elected into the Hall of Fame. There's obviously many factors that go into what makes a player eligible for the Hall of Fame. But are all of these reasonable? After doing some peer-reviewed research, I found out that the biggest factor on what goes into making a player eligible for the Hall of Fame is individual statistics. The second thing to look at is team accomplishments. And that's kind of where I think it gets a little unfair, Some players are drafted into the leagues on teams that aren't in the best situation. Some players have great coaches surrounding them, great players surrounding them. Some players have absolutely nothing. So you could be a first overall pick, go to a terrible team, and be considered a bust for how you played, even though your team could be the reason that you're getting held back. So I feel like the fact that they're looking at this for team statistics almost as much as individual statistics is, I think that's a little weird. For example, we got Matthew Stafford. He's the current quarterback for the Los Angeles Rams. He's been with LA. This is his third year in Los Angeles, and he was with Detroit for 12 seasons. He's 35 years old. All time, Stafford ranks top 11 in both passing yards and passing touchdowns, along with being top 5 in passing yards per game. Stafford was the first overall pick in 2009, and he came to a Detroit Lions team that was coming off an 0-16 season, which is the first time any team's ever done that in the history of football. He had a rocky first year where he was constantly getting injured and just throwing interceptions more than touchdowns, which wasn't a good look for being the first overall pick. But after a couple seasons, he really figured it out. He threw for over 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns in 2011 and became one of the best quarterbacks in the whole entire league. Being a quarterback in the situation that Matthew Stafford was drafted to is not easy at all, because if the team loses or anything negative happens, who's getting the blame? It's going to be Stafford. In Stafford's 12 years with Detroit, he only had one top 10 defense the whole entire time. So while he was scoring on one side of the field, the defense was letting the other team score on the other side of the field, which really held the Lions back from a lot. Stafford also never had a running back with over 1,000 yards while he was on the team. Basically, my point here is that some players have it worse. Like Matthew Stafford, for example, I just named all the things that weren't going for him when he came to Detroit and throughout his whole time with Detroit. And then there's players like Tom Brady. You get drafted to a team where they've got basically everything going on for them, and you join the team at the perfect time. Great receivers, great offense, great defense, great coaching. It's easy for you to adapt to the NFL rather than try to flip the whole team around on your own, while everyone thinks that whenever something goes wrong is your fault because you're supposed to be the leader of the organization. While many people don't realize it, Stafford is actually one of the most influential quarterbacks in the history of football. Players like Mahomes and Rodgers started doing no-look passes after Matthew Stafford. They said that they got it from him. So Stafford has been using his arm to benefit himself his whole entire career, and players are learning from him and using that to their own skill set. Stafford was traded to the Rams, and the Rams went immediately from being a bubble playoff team to winning the Super Bowl, and Cooper Kupp having the greatest wide receiver season of all time. Cooper Kupp finished with 1,947 yards, which is just 17 yards behind Calvin Johnson's record of 1,964 yards, which was also done when Stafford was his quarterback. So Stafford is now the passer behind the top 2 most yards in a season by any receiver of all time. I looked up 7 articles to see if people think that Stafford is deserving to be a Hall of Famer, and 5 of the articles said that he's not. The whole debate originally, when people were talking about Stafford potentially being in the Hall of Fame, was he never had a playoff win, he never had a Super Bowl. Now he has a Super Bowl with 1 year on a new team and 4 playoff wins just in that year. Right now, there's 36 quarterbacks in the Hall of Fame, and if Stafford ranks top 11 in just about every category, if not better, then how does that make sense for Stafford not to be in the Hall of Fame? I don't disagree that team statistics should be used to determine whether or not a player should make the Hall of Fame, but I just don't agree that it should be as important as individual statistics. It doesn't really make sense because the Hall of Fame is different than MVP, which I also don't think should be used as much with team statistics, but it is. But the Hall of Fame is different. The Hall of Fame is a select group of players that are some of the best of all time. It doesn't have to do with their team's winning percentage. Because when you talk about a defensive end, nobody's going to care about what their team's record is. But when you're a quarterback, why does it make sense that your team's winning record is important? Why does it make sense that you made the playoff X amount of times? It doesn't make sense. A player who has similar stats at their position to Stafford does is LaDainian Tomlinson. And LaDainian Tomlinson was with the Chargers for 8 years. Tomlinson made the playoffs 5 times in his career, which is just one more time than Stafford has, and Stafford has a Super Bowl to his name. So I feel like this goes to show that even with someone who has very similar numbers at their position to someone else at a tougher position, it's obvious that there's some rules that are biased to certain positions. So overall, not only do I think Stafford should make the Hall of Fame, but I think he should make it easily with his numbers being so high up all time with the Super Bowl to his name now. I think there's no doubt that he should make the Hall of Fame. Also, I think that the Hall of Fame rules need to be changed and need to be more realistic. I feel like you can't take away from a player who's put up elite stats consistently throughout their whole entire career. And I'm not talking just Matthew Stafford at this point. I'm talking any player ever, any current player who's deserving. You can't take away the fact that they're putting up these great numbers just because they're stuck in a bad situation on a team that has historically been bad.